Hi guys, this is Jeff Schmoe. We've been getting a lot of questions about variations in taste and quality of cigars from recent past, within 10 years till now. Decided that we should maybe have a quick discussion on tobacco and what's going on now versus what was going on in the past. As some of you may know, Mark and I are both physics guys. I've taken quite a bit of chemistry, but extremely limited in the amount of biology that I've studied. So please have a little indulgence if I mispronounce any of the biological terms. But in order to really start this discussion, we have to start with Cuba. And in recent years, since the 90s, which I basically only smoked Cubans in the 90s, uh, the demand for Cuban cigars, and this has a lot to do with China, has really accelerated. And in order to meet those demands, the Cubans have been planting their tobacco in plots where they're not necessarily best suited for the highest quality product. Throw in a decrease in fermentation times, curing times, and just overall aging, you're starting to get less quality in the tobacco. Throw in now that large number I just mentioned, and now you need rollers. It takes a long time for a qualified roller, especially if you're going to do the figurinos. So basically you have tobacco, which is difficult to produce. It's difficult to mix. It's a solid. If you're doing a liquid, you add a little bit more milk if your batter isn't right. It's very different with a solid. Uh, it takes extreme sensory ability in order to make solids, and B, you have to have the right stuff. So this has taken a severe demand on the quality of the Cuban cigar. So if you take a look at present day pricing, you can see which Cuban companies have remained consistent with their manufacturing method. Cohiba, obviously, is the hardest one to get, and they taste basically the same as they always have. The other end of the spectrum, you have Hoy de Monterey, which we reviewed one, and there is a severe decrease in the quality, especially as you get to the larger ring gauges. So in general, they're nothing at all like they used to be. So in the 90s, there were between early 90s and late 90s, there were 100 to 400 million cigars made. So 400 by 97. Most were at that time Connecticut shade, and which was what, 31, 32% from the primary bands. By 98, it had dropped to almost 17%. So a lot of this was due to the growing tobacco in Ecuador, where labor is cheaper, because Connecticut shade obviously came from Connecticut in the beginning, and due to the climate, you don't need a net there. So they have a high cloud cover, so there's no netting. Everything got cheaper, but at the same time, consumers were looking more towards a full-bodied cigar. So the Connecticut broadleaf was basically falling by the wayside. And as that happened, you got the rise of Nicaragua. So 94, I believe, Padron introduced the 63 anniversary series, I guess the 64 anniversary series, and that really put Nicaragua on the map, because prior to that, Nicaragua was thwarted from importing pretty much anything due to political issues. It had to do with the Sandinista government, if anybody remembers all that stuff. And presently, they are now only second to the Dominican Republic. And speaking of the Dominican Republic, in 95, Fuente, whose hat I'm wearing, and I am actually smoking a Davidoff right now. Quite good, actually, especially if I could keep it lit. They launched an Opus X, which really kickstarted the premier cigar trend. So I don't know how many people, what ages of people are watching this, but they used to be really, really difficult to come by. and were released only twice a year. So moving forward, 10 years from 95 when he launched the Opus to 2005. 2005 was the first year that the Dominicans were given the Cigar of the Year. So, once you got the Opus, they came out with the VSG, and then Lido Gomez came out with the La Flor Dominica line, the Ligero line, which was extremely popular. So, that's basically how cigars have gotten. Now, the real question is, why do they taste different? So let's get into the chemistry, which is always fun. But cigars are required to ferment, and fermentation adjusts the chemical and chemical and physical properties of the cigar. What you have are microorganisms using proteins, carbohydrates, and other natural occurrences in the leaves in order to make changes, right? So it's something that's highly environmental. You need the right temperatures and you need the right humidity. And they did some studies in China, and I read some papers on this recently, where they determined the best temperature for tobacco fermentation was 27 degrees centigrade. So one of the things that they do, there are instances where people use starter cultures for fermentation. So you could think of it as yeast, making bread from yesterday's yeast, to assist in the consistency, because it's really important to get a consistent fermentation. You want to get the sugars correct. So now you have, how does that affect the quality? Standard production for the quality of a cigar, you need cultivation, air curing, fermentation, and rolling. So in general, fermentation is the most effective and influential component in producing quality in a cigar, or quality in a tobacco, not even a cigar. So what really, as I mentioned, you need humidity and air moisture content, temperature, and time. Those are the fermentation requirements. And in recent years, the Chinese as well as the islands have found exogenous additives. So they're adding things to help facilitate the fermentation process. So some of these additives are plant extracts, bacterium and enzymes, and mixtures of all of these things. So it's kind of, it's a mishmash of how are they doing it best. And one of the best mixtures that they found was a green tea infusion using diluted diluted milk and rice wine. How they came up with that, I don't know. I mean, obviously, it's a different chemistry. And that affected the flavor components in an extremely positive way. So these additives theoretically alter the growth and metabolism of the microorganisms that are doing the fermentation, leading to a better cigar. Well, it's interesting to you. So some of the studies, you're really looking at nitrogen, sugar, organic acids, and aroma components, and that's how you define cigar quality. So nitrogen, sugar, and organic acids, those in particular relate directly to the sweetness and mellowness of a cigar. So in general, there are 6 conventional chemical components in tobacco. You have the total nitrogen, nicotine, total sugar, reducing sugar, potassium, and chloride. Now it's getting really boring. So total nitrogen and nicotine relate directly to the concentration and pungency of the smoke. So if you like that big smoky flavor or big smoky experience, that chemistry of the tobacco has increased the nitrogen and nicotine. So during fermentation, the nicotine turns to nornoquine, and during smoking, the nicotine degrades to nitrogen, heteroclic aromatic components such as pyrrole, pyridine, pyrazine, and as you're smoking the nicotine, what it does is it gives it an aroma. Mark and I talk about the smell. The smell of the nicotine degrading tastes like baked and caramel components. So if you want to know why your cigar smells like anything baked, or when we say it has a nice caramel flavor, it has to do with how they prepared the nicotine for burning. So by the end of the fermentation process, hopefully, if they've done it long enough, most of the sugars are now basically undetectable. Um, what you're left with is an amount of potassium and chloride, or chlorine, and chlorine and potassium are important for the combustibility. So if you don't have enough potassium and chlorine, your cigar will not burn well, and sometimes you get funny lines, and sometimes it just wants to go out. So there are also a bunch of non-volatile organic acids that help things. Some of them help regulate the mellowness of the flavor. And apparently, they've shown, what do I have? 14 acids. There are 14 acids within the leaves. So during fermentation, as we discussed, you get rid of most of these acids. And they've determined that around 21 days is the proper length of time for maximum fermentation. So this time allows unsaturated fatty acids to dissolve, which are oleic and lineoleic. And by doing this, you start getting a smoother flavor. It's like when you smoke some of the Davidoffs and some of the Padrones, you get a very, very smooth. You don't get that slight bite that you would get. So the aroma components, what gives the aroma? The alcohols, alkenes, phenolics, ketones, acid esters, heterocycles, and basically the alcohols and the ketones account for about 80% of the aroma. So for highest quality, oh, it looks like a thunderstorm in Florida. The highest quality for fermentation for aromatic components is 14 days. So as you can see, there's now going to be a trade-off by individual cigar companies. What do they want their flavor to actually taste like? So one of the more important ones is you want to get rid of the chlorophyll. So when chlorophyll degrades, it produces neophytidine, which it's a delicate aroma, but if you maintain the chlorophyll, it actually smells like urine. So any of you have purchased a box of cigars, and I had that experience with a Garo, and you're getting that acidic flavor that's very hard to deal with. One of the tricks that I found is wrap your cigar in a paper towel and throw it in the microwave for 5 seconds. Let it cool down, obviously, and what that does is it initiates the chemical process to break down the chlorophyll. You don't get the wonderful taste that you get in a more expensive cigar, but it does make those cigars palatable. So this is a bad word. Magastigmatrione is what possesses the fruity aroma, and enhancing that word will give you a mellowness, sweetness, and you get a clean taste. Dihydroactiniodine also increases the mellowness and a clean taste. Plus, it gives you a fruity and a baked aroma flavor. So there's a bunch of fungals that get involved. I'm not going to get into that. It's beyond me. So the real question comes down to what changes the cigar's taste over time. And there's several possibilities. Quality of leaves in the fermentation process, obviously that would be my first answer. You always start with the leaves. So with increased demand, the fermentation time may have changed. Quality of leaves have degraded. Manufacturers are adding organics to the process, which they say are still all natural, but it's still not how it was. But by adding such things, you can impart a different chemical balance to the leaves. They also now, they refrigerate the leaves, they're freezing leaves in order to maintain pest control. There's a lot of things that go on. Um, our listeners are not wrong in their opinion that cigars do not taste the same as they used to, but I can get an equivalent number of people saying they taste better. So, if I'm a marketing guy for a cigar company, it's like, do I want to keep my old guys that liked it a certain way at an increased cost, or do I have enough new people to change my manufacturing experience to increase uh, profits? Could go either way. Anyway, this was just a quick one. Mark's at his house swimming. We have 2 more cigars we'll be doing this week. Thanks for watching and have a great day.